If it triggers you, it's trying to teach you. Today's class is all going to be about teaching you exactly how to become more non-reactive in your life. So if you're somebody who you notice where a lot of people tend to hurt your feelings, a lot of situations in life tend to beat you down easily, and you feel like maybe you're not mentally as strong, or just simply that you're tired of other people having this power over you where you're always reacting to situations going on. And you want to be able to approach them in a new lens. You want to be able to approach them in more of a relaxed, calm state. You want to be able to respond differently to things happening, or at least just not be so affected by others. This is going to be the training for you here today. By the end of this training, you're going to have a clear understanding on exactly how this works and how to take the things that come into your life and approach them completely differently so that way you can genuinely make a change. Now, one of my favorite sayings is how you've actually changed in your life when it comes to doing inner work or inner transformation, not when your outer results reflect it, because that always takes a little bit of time, but you've genuinely changed when you start responding to the same things going on in your life differently. That's how you know you've changed, because when you start responding differently, then new changes actually start to come to fruition, right? New things actually start to unfold. Because if we keep responding in the same way, what happens is that we collapse back to the old identity. So we keep operating, thinking, being, feeling, acting as the same person, and nothing actually changes. So here's what's going on. Somebody says something, we'll say for an example, right? So they say something and it sparks something inside of you and it creates a negative emotion. And then typically what happens is then we find ourselves having to be on defense mode. We're reacting to them. We're getting emotional. We feel overall hurt. And we don't want that, right? That's no fun. That doesn't help us. It doesn't progress our lives any better. And to when someone gives you hate and you give them hate back, it doesn't make you feel any better. It just drains you, right? It doesn't have any positive effect whatsoever. So many fights and conflicts could be saved if we just had this pure, proper understanding of how our mind works. So I'm going to break it all down for you. So, then we often probably feel like, if you're watching this here, that okay, well, gosh, the world throws so many things my way. So there's so many challenges, there's so many struggles, situations, conflicts, events, breakups, you lose your job, people die, you go through fights with your partner. All this stuff is happening. It's like, how do I handle this? Right? Even the person in traffic who's flipping me off or cutting me off, like I don't want to be so on edge all the time. I don't want to be so angry and peed off all the time. Okay. So, how do we get to the point where it's complete non-reactive, where internally we feel so good? We're coming from a positive, proper place, and it's like all the things that are happening outside of us, people can say whatever they want about us. Life can throw us whatever it has in store for us. We can be in the worst of the worst situations, yet we're coming out with a smile on our face. We're handling it so properly. People look at you like, how are you so strong? How are you mentally so strong? How are you so unaffected? How does that not bother you? This is how we do it. So here's the explanation is basically, let's take this situation from the start. Somebody says something. Okay? Somebody says something about you. You're ugly, they don't like your face, whatever it may be. You're not good enough, whatever it may be. Here's what we got to know is that that event that's taking place, so that person who is saying that thing, that event is actually meaningless. What I mean by meaningless is that if you were not there, the observer, experiencing it, and they were just saying that in the woods, it has no meaning. But you are there and they're saying it, but it still has no meaning. Doesn't matter if they're saying it to you, to the tree, whatever it may be. What's happening is things are simply just happening. That person is simply just saying words. It actually has literally zero meaning. And how you can really understand this is, let's say, for example, because right now you're like, well, it does mean something to me because it's bothering me and it's affecting me and that person's hurting my feelings, right? But I want to twist that and actually say that they're actually not hurting your feelings. You're allowing yourself to hurt your own feelings. You are hurting your own feelings. And here's what I mean. Let's say they said something, but it was a complete lie that you knew was like a fact. Like it's a lie. Like this is just not true whatsoever. For example, let's say they said your third leg. Obviously, you don't have a third leg. But let's say they said your third leg was gross, ugly. Okay, your third arm is ugly and gross. you would laugh at them, right? You would laugh at them. It would spark no negative reaction. It means nothing to you. So even before you laugh though, and they said that, it literally means nothing. But then, right, you gave it meaning. So that's why you laughed. So that's the first thing that you should know is that the things that people are saying to you, so they are not hurting you, you are hurting yourself by the way you're perceiving the things that they're doing or saying. That's the number one key recognition. They can try to hurt you with, we're talking about words, by the way, not physically, but they can try to hurt you with their words, but it's up to you if you're actually going to be hurt by it. And it all comes down to the meaning that you're giving the situation. So, how does this work? Okay, so back to the start, right? There's an event that happens, okay? And this event, this can be from many things, not just somebody saying something to you, but like it can be something happening in your life, situations, whatever it may be. It's all meaningless. Don't take that as a bad thing, by the way. It's one of the most powerful things to know as a person, and you'll understand why hereafter. So, the situation itself is meaningless. And then what happens in our mind, how our mind works, is that we first must, this happens so fast, you don't even recognize it also, but first of all, the event happens, you then interpret the event, you give it some sort of meaning, okay? After you interpret the event, then it influences your emotions. So your emotional response, it gives you an emotion. You never feel emotions randomly. You never ever feel emotions randomly. In order for you to have an emotion about something, you must first have an interpretation or give some sort of meaning to the experience, to the situation going on. You might say, well, there's nothing going on in my life. But here's the thing is that even a thought could be something going on. Your brain doesn't know the difference between imagination and reality, right? So you could be imagining of something going on and spark an emotion from it. So you never feel emotions randomly. So you first interpret something, okay? You give meaning to the situation that's going on in your reality experience and whatever's going on. And then it influences the emotions that you feel. Okay? So triggers, let's say hate. And then that becomes our personal experience. They said that thing to me, and I feel so much hate and anger. And then that inspires how we respond, how we react to it moving forwards, and that produces our future results. That's why I said beforehand is that if you want a new future, if you want new results, the first way to know that you've actually changed, that you're going to get it, is that you start to respond to the things happening in your life completely differently. So that's how it all works there. And now the question becomes, what determines how we give things meaning then? Okay, if everything in reality, including life and death, by the way, because oftentimes we will automatically assume that, death is a negative thing and a poor thing, a terrible thing. But look at kids, for example, before kids are programmed, they're celebrating having fun at a funeral, thinking everyone's at a dress up party. They don't actually understand, they don't actually know. And in some cultures, they actually celebrate death, right? So again, everything is neutral. We give it meaning. And we could easily say that how we give things meaning is from our culture, it's from our society, from our conditioning, our parents, our experience, and that's all true. But the problem with that, if you just stop right here, if you just stop right there and say, well, it's because of my culture and that's how I approach it, it's because of my conditioning, it's how I approach it. Yeah, but how do I change that? Because that's ingrained into you, that's your past, that made who you are now. So if you just see it through that way, you can't change it. So we need to understand, okay, well, what about my culture caused me to interpret things this way? What about my conditioning caused me to interpret things this way? What about my parents caused me to give meaning to these situations? Well, that comes down to the root of it all. Okay? And that is your belief systems. Okay? So, yes, these all are true and they play a role, but it all comes down to basically determining what you believe is true about yourself, about the world, reality, people, whatever it may be. Your core belief systems produce everything else coming through. And I'll explain what I mean by that. And the coolest thing is that you can change this, right? Because remember, you can't change your past parenting and how you're growing up. You can't change your conditioning. You can't change your culture. Like that stuff already happened and it formed who you are. But you can change who you are. You can change your belief systems. That's one of the most powerful things you should know. So Here's how it works is your core belief systems, when it comes specifically to this situation we're talking about, how it works. So your core belief systems influence how you interpret things, the meaning you assign to things, your perspective on things, etc. That then causes your emotional state, okay, your emotional response or whatever, the emotion that you feel, and that influences your response or your reaction. That's how that works. Belief systems are also in charge of influencing the consistent thoughts that you have. Thought and emotion held over time produces your identity, and that influences your focus, your decisions, your actions, your behaviors, which produce actual physical results in the world as well. So your belief systems are like the core of everything. That's how I like to look at it, at least. So moving on from that, now that we know this, we can look at this again. All right. And let's say the event happens again, and someone's like, "You're a bad person." Okay. It's just a neutral event. Why do I feel so bad about that situation though? Why did that hurt me inside? The only reason why it would hurt you is because you had an interpretation of the situation in a negative lens, okay, or in a way that caused you to feel that negative emotion. Then, and this is different for everybody, but then you can start to dissect, okay, well, what would I have to believe is true to be seeing the situation, this lens that caused me to feel this way? What would I have to believe is true about myself, this situation, to be feeling this way right now about it? And if you ask those specific questions, what you'll notice is a limiting belief will arise. And then you can remove that limiting belief because that's not helping you, it's not serving you in your life. And you can keep that program going. You'll keep responding, reacting the same way, being affected by that thing, but that doesn't help you, right? So you might as well let that go and implement and program a new belief to function off of. So sometimes the reason why we get so upset with the things that people say is because a part of us believes that it actually is true. You are bad. What if I am really a bad person? And then that sparks chaos or outrage or anger, or makes us sad, right? Because again, if we knew for a fact that we were not a bad person, we would look at them and say, well, that's funny, right? That's hilarious. You have no idea who I even am. So we'd laugh, we'd be happy, wouldn't bother us at all. So the reason when we get sparked, when we get triggered, it's usually because there's something inside of us that we're not secure about on our own. We're usually insecure about something. Insecure as in not stabilized with an idea or a belief about ourselves, right? So let's say if you're insecure about your looks, your body, and you genuinely don't believe you're good looking, and you put on a front to try to be good looking, or whatever it may be, you try to come out that way, but then someone says something like that, and it sparks that reaction inside you, it shows you where you're still not free. It shows you where there's still work to be done. That's why our enemies, the people we don't prefer or don't like, are some of our greatest teachers because they're showing us where we're not free. They're showing us where we can see something differently, or they can simply just show us who we don't prefer to be around so we know who we do prefer to be around. But our enemies are always teaching us something. And when we can really understand how our mind works and how we interact with reality and view situations based off our belief systems and our focus and all this stuff, we can really start to take our power back and change your life for the better or change your life for how you really want it. Because it goes so much deeper than that. But you should really know that everything is simply just happening. And you are in control of your personal experience through it, all based on your state of being. State of being as in your identity, how you're perceiving the world, how you're interacting with the world. The common quote is circumstances don't matter, state of being matters. What I mean by that is like the worst of the worst could happen to you, the worst of the worst in someone's mind. But what if that worst of the worst was actually the best thing needed for you to go and change your life? Well, that would only happen if you looked at the situation through that lens of like, hey, this is happening to me. This is teaching me something. I'm going to make this situation to something so good for myself in the future. That's why when you come in with a positive state, it doesn't matter how quote unquote bad the situation may be. What matters is your state of being. Because you could also go through the same situation, but in a lens of a victim of like everything happens to me and the world is a bad place and I struggle and I can't ever succeed. And then that worst thing happens and it's like, see, look, this is proof. This is evidence on why my life sucks. And then we stay the same, we don't change. And we're so bought into that. So a few reminders here is that number one, another way to remember this, to not react to people any longer, is take a pause, observe before reacting. Okay, observe before you react. So if someone says something, always practice taking a few seconds to really analyze what they said, what's going on, and then remember that it's a meaningless thing and you're about to give it meaning. So if you notice that you're about to give the situation a negative meaning, it's probably connected to a negative belief system about yourself, the world, or the person or the situation. So observe before you react, because once you observe before you react, there's a little gap. And then you can actually decide how you want to respond to the situation. You don't need to take it so personal. You don't need to take it personal whatsoever. And oftentimes you should know that most people are projecting onto you just what they believe about themselves, what they see about themselves, or what they're focused on based on their own belief systems. It's really not ever or oftentimes so personal as you think. But that's the next thing. So that's the first thing is observe before you react. Practice taking that pause before responding or reacting. Next is always try to make a good meaning out of what's going on. Always try to see it from the best angle, the best lens, find the best learning lesson, whatever it may be, because you can. If you really work on your mind, you can. Next is be certain about yourself. Have a stable self image, be secure within yourself, be certain within yourself. Because when you know who you are, you don't need validation from other people. When you know who you are, you don't need reminders or reassurance so much. And therefore, you're stable. You're stabilizing your own self image. So when people will say something about you, it won't really affect you that much because internally you know who you are. And people can think all they want. And it doesn't matter at the end of the day. What matters is who you are, who you know yourself to be, how you are, etc. That's all up to you. So those are the last few pointers I would share before this training ends. But that is the training for today, guys, on how your enemies are often your biggest teachers. They're trying to teach you something and how to really learn those lessons, how to be non-reactive in the world, how to approach situations so much better, and therefore create a better future for yourself. Now, if you like this training, make sure you subscribe for more. I post every single Monday and Thursday. And also, if you really like this, check out my Instagram for daily clips. I'm always posting daily content and help on there. So you can follow my Instagram. The link is in description. It's at Caden Hayward on Instagram. But thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this training today, guys. I'll see you on the next one.